Today in Random in Psychology, we are talking about one of psychology's favorite people, Sigmund Freud. And one of the concepts related to his theory of personality is the superego. So if you haven't heard, I choose a random number from a random number chooser, like you do, and choose a concept on that page that is picked by the random number generator from my general psychology textbook. And so today it brought up the superego. So according to Freud's theory, the personality consists of three different parts. The ego, the id, and the superego. The ego, well, let's start with the superego. The superego's job is to kind of be the watchdog of the personality and of life and behavior in general. So we kind of think of it as like the angel on your shoulder, whereas the the id is the devil on your shoulder, and the ego sits in between the two and goes, now y'all. So the superego is saying we should make sure that we don't have too many Christmas cookies. Mine says that sometimes. And then the id is on the other side saying like, but I want all of the Christmas cookies. And the ego says, well, let's do this. We'll have 2 Christmas cookies, and then we will make sure that we walk the dog later. Everybody happy? And everybody's not happy, but at least, it's kind of a win-win-ish, right? So Freud actually came up with the superego concept before he wrote about the other two concepts. And so in the 1890s, he wrote about the superego and called it the watchdog of the personality. And then later in the 1930s, he brought up the ego and the superego. And so kind of interesting. He believed that the superego wasn't developed until between the ages of 5 and 6. So that would mean that our 2 and 3-year-olds wouldn't experience shame or guilt. And he also believed that the superego was developed from parents, peers, teachers, society telling us what was right and wrong. And obviously, he was coming from Victorian times, so even religion stepping in and telling us what we should and should not be doing. So there's actually an interesting theory as well that the superego is in support, and this is a theory that I had never heard before I did some more reading today, because when I do these videos, I don't want to just give you what I already know, but I kind of spend 15-20 minutes learning more about different parts of the theory just so that I can present some like really strange or weird stuff, right? So there are some folks that believe that the superego is actually in service of the id. So the superego tells us like, hey, don't eat all of the cookies. And we do eat all of the cookies in order to spite the superego, which actually enhances the id. So it's almost as if, the superego is telling us not to do something actually benefits the id. And so, yeah, this is a theory that's out there about this. And so, I can see how that would make sense, but at the same time, that's definitely not how I have seen it. And I do want to remind you that as I'm talking about this stuff, these videos are all, what I have learned about these theories. And sometimes there may be personal observations. Those personal observations don't reflect, the college that I work for or psychology in general. So don't be calling the API on me. So let's talk about, what does the science say? Freud thought of himself as a scientist, and maybe in his time period, he was. But now in 2025, I almost said 2026. In 2025, science is a little bit different, and we want data, and we want lots of it, and we want replication to make sure that we're, saying the right thing and doing the right things. And this brings up a really good question of like, how would you test this? How is this theory testable? How do we test whether or not there are, the ego and the superego in terms of our personality? Like how does that work? I'm sorry. the pizza guy just delivered the pizza because it's decided that it was pizza night. So it is really challenging to test as a concept. And so today's science doesn't really have data to support the evidence of a superego. What we can say is that there is research evidence that looks at children and their development of guilt, shame, embarrassment, which would all relate to the activities of the superego. And remember, Freud said that the superego wasn't developed until 5 or 6 years of age. And the research shows that children at between 14 and 22 months can actually demonstrate guilt, shame, and embarrassment. So that would be evidence that says that, at least his prediction of when these things develop, if they are there, that the age group would be potentially incorrect for some children. So that is your random in psychology for today. I will see you tomorrow.